Hi there, I'm Clarissa. A year ago, my father kicked me out of the only home I ever knew, all because of a lie my sister told. A lie so outrageous it shattered everything in an instant. I thought family meant unconditional love. But what happens when the people you trust the most turn their backs without warning? Before we dive into it, have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do by someone you loved? The house was still warm when I stepped inside, the late evening sun bleeding amber light through the curtains. It smelled like roasted chicken and fresh bread, and for a split second, I thought maybe things would be different. Maybe the hollow between us could start to heal. I dropped my school bag by the door and toed off my shoes, trying to shake off the exhaustion from another long day teaching fourth graders who barely listened. Warren's voice called out sharply from the living room, slicing through the hum of the ceiling fan. "Clarissa, now." I hesitated, feeling a knot tighten low in my stomach. Lorraine was perched stiffly at the far end of the couch, arms folded tight across her chest, her face an unreadable mask. Lacey sat opposite her, curled up with fake innocence practically dripping off her, twirling a strand of her hair between her fingers. "You've been busy," Warren said, voice low and flat like a warning. "Lacey found something when you stayed over last weekend." My mouth dried instantly. "What do you mean?" He didn't hesitate. "Drugs? Hidden in your room? You think we wouldn't find out?" I froze, blinking, heart hammering so hard it blurred my hearing. "That's not true. I don't even—" My voice cracked under the sheer absurdity of it. "I would never—" Lorraine shifted slightly, her eyes hard. "Clarissa, denial only makes it worse." I turned toward Lacey, desperate, but she just widened her doe eyes, shrugging helplessly as if this whole mess hurt her too. A performance worthy of an Oscar. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered. "You're making a mistake." Warren shook his head, the decision already made. "You need to leave. Tonight." Shock slammed into me so hard I stumbled back a step. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. He stood towering, pointing toward the hallway. "That's not my problem." I wanted to scream, to beg him to see me, really see me, but the air had turned too thick, and my tongue felt stapled to the roof of my mouth. Lorraine remained a silent judge. Lacey hid a smile behind a trembling hand. I packed blindly, barely registering the clothes I stuffed into a battered suitcase. My hands shook so badly I could barely zip it shut. When I turned to leave, no one followed. No one said goodbye. The porch light flickered weakly above me as I dragged the suitcase down the driveway. The night air was heavy, pressing against my skin like a second betrayal. Cicadas buzzed loudly in the trees, an orchestra of indifference. I paused at the sidewalk, suitcase handle digging into my palm, and looked back once. Just once. The house remained still, its windows darkening with the fading light, as if it had already erased me. "I had always believed home would save me," I whispered into the empty night. "I just never thought I'd have to save myself instead." The air smelled of buttercream and artificial vanilla when I stepped into the house. Bright balloons clustered around the staircase, and streamers dangled from the chandelier like lazy vines. The banner stretched above the living room doorway read, "Happy Birthday, Lacey," in glittery gold letters that caught the late afternoon light. I paused just inside the door, clutching the small gift I had wrapped the night before. Something modest but thoughtful. For a second, I thought maybe another banner would hang nearby, one for me. A smaller one, even a handwritten card. Anything. But the house screamed one name, and it wasn't mine. Lorraine bustled over, smiling as if nothing was out of place. "Oh, Clarissa, glad you made it. It's been so busy. You know how things get." Her voice was breezy, hollow. She handed me a plain white card. I opened it. No name, no message beyond a rushed, "Love Mom and Dad." Not even my name spelled out. Just another blank courtesy. Guests mingled without noticing me. Relatives and old neighbors I'd known all my life, but who now smiled past me like I was part of the wallpaper. Someone handed Lacey a cake topped with candles shaped like the number 22. She clapped delightedly, soaking in the attention, basking in the easy warmth I could never quite reach. I drifted to the edge of the room, trying not to look awkward, trying to believe this wasn't as humiliating as it felt. I sipped flat soda and made meaningless small talk with a distant cousin who couldn't even remember where I worked. All around me, laughter rose like smoke, thick and suffocating. And then came the moment that still scrapes against my ribs when I remember it. Lacey, in front of everyone, swooped toward me, arms open wide. "Clarissa!" she squealed loudly, pulling me into a hug so tight it almost choked me. "I'm sorry if you ever felt left out. You know I love you, right?" I stood there stiffly, conscious of dozens of eyes swiveling toward us, smiling guests, nods of approval. Look how gracious Lacey is. Look at how close they are. While she held me close, her lips barely brushed my ear. "Keep smiling," she hissed, breath sweet with frosting. "Or it gets worse." The air punched out of my lungs, but I forced the corners of my mouth up. I even patted her back awkwardly before she pulled away, radiant in her victory. I floated through the rest of the evening, a specter haunting a house that was no longer mine. Every conversation blurred together. Every congratulation felt like a thorn. Lorraine gushed about Lacey's new job prospects. Warren boasted about her upcoming trip to Europe. No one asked me anything at all. Later, I found myself outside, sitting on the edge of the wooden fence that bordered the backyard. It was cooler out there, the grass damp beneath my heels, the sky beginning to turn the soft blue-gray of oncoming dusk. Inside, the party roared on without me, a celebration in which I had no place. I watched the lights twinkle through the windows, heard the laughter bubble up and spill into the night air. I thought about all the years I had swallowed small humiliations, convinced myself that love meant patience, that family meant forgiveness, even when it cut deep. But sitting there alone, wrapped in the humid Texas evening, a different thought settled into me like a stone sinking through water. I was never really part of this family. I just hadn't dared to see it yet. The clock on the microwave blinked 1:47 a.m. in the cramped kitchen. The buzzing of the overhead fluorescent light was the only sound filling the room. I hunched over my old laptop, its fan whining in protest, fingers trembling as I scrolled through forgotten folders, hoping, praying for something. And then I found it. Screenshots, emails, timestamps, all quietly buried in the recesses of my hard drive. Evidence that could have cleared my name a year ago. I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. My hands moved on their own, plugging in a cheap flash drive, copying everything as fast as the sluggish machine would allow. For the first time in months, my chest loosened just a little. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe there was still a way to show them who I really was. I left the laptop humming quietly on the table and dragged myself to bed, exhaustion finally overtaking me. I slept with the flash drive tucked under my pillow, like a child hiding a secret from the monsters under the bed. The next morning, sunlight poured through the blinds, too bright, too harsh. I shuffled toward the kitchen, heart lifting slightly despite the heavy ache still lodged in my ribs. I had something they couldn't take from me now, or so I thought. When I tapped the power button, the laptop let out a sad whir, and then nothing. Black screen. I tried again and again. Cold dread slithered down my spine. I sat back slowly, heart pounding. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't random. I remembered Lorraine stopping by yesterday, all smiles and sweet words about dropping off some school documents she needed to print. How she had asked so casually to use my laptop for just a second. My stomach turned. I grabbed my phone, digging through browser histories, cloud backups. Gone. Every file, every screenshot, every shred of evidence, wiped clean. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. I slid to the floor, knees curling into my chest, feeling the linoleum press cold against my skin. They weren't just willing to believe the worst about me. They were willing to destroy any chance I had to defend myself. Warren, Lorraine, and Lacey, smiling behind them all. I wasn't fighting a misunderstanding. I was fighting an empire. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. Crying wouldn't fix this. Begging wouldn't fix this. They had made sure I had nothing left to stand on, nothing but myself. I pushed myself up slowly, my joints stiff, my throat raw. I grabbed my phone again, not to call anyone, just to clear it. I opened my photo albums, scrolled through the memories, Christmas mornings, birthdays, graduations, smiling faces, arms draped around me, all lies. One by one, I deleted them. The Christmas where Warren gave Lacey a car and me a $10 gift card. The summer vacation where Lorraine cropped me out of the group photo by accident. The family reunion where Lacey cried on command and everyone rallied around her, leaving me standing in the rain. Delete, delete, delete. The final photo blinked away, leaving nothing but empty albums and a pulsing hollow space inside my chest. They erased me first. I was just finishing the job. The hum of summer filled the streets outside my apartment. All laughter and sizzling barbecues, the kind of noise that usually signaled happiness. But inside my tiny kitchen, everything felt static, airless, like the walls were slowly pressing inward. I sat hunched over my phone, thumb absently scrolling through social media feeds I hadn't cared to check in weeks. A familiar snapshot caught my eye. A family photo, beaming faces gathered around a shimmering lake, arms flung over each other's shoulders. Lorraine, Warren, Lacey, and a handful of extended relatives. Everyone but me. For a second, I just stared, heart thudding with confusion. I raked back through my memory, trying to recall if I'd missed an invitation. But no email, no text, not even a passive-aggressive phone call. I dialed Lorraine on impulse before my better judgment could catch up. She picked up on the second ring, voice as smooth and sugary as always. "Oh, Clarissa," she chirped. "I thought you were busy with work, sweetheart. We didn't want to bother you." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "You didn't even ask." A beat of silence crackled through the line before she laughed lightly. "You're so sensitive, honey. We just assumed." I hung up without another word, the hollow weight in my chest growing heavier. Later that afternoon, I walked over to the small park 2 blocks from my apartment. It was the same park where my parents used to take me for ice cream on sticky July nights, before Lacey was born, before the world turned sideways. I wasn't there long before an old neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, shuffled up to me, leaning on her cane. "Your dad said you didn't want to come to the lake," she said, smiling gently, like she was offering a piece I didn't deserve. I blinked at her, the words like a slap. "He said you needed space," she added, patting my arm, "that you preferred being alone these days." I nodded stiffly, thanking her for the information, pretending it didn't shatter something new inside me. Warren hadn't just forgotten to invite me. He had rewritten the narrative entirely, turned me into the selfish, cold daughter who chose isolation over family. I sat back down on the park bench, staring up at the blank Texas sky, feeling a hollowness spread from my chest to my fingertips. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't an oversight, it was intentional. If I was ever going to survive this, truly survive, I needed to stop believing that the people who had hurt me would suddenly wake up and be better. I had spent so long trying to prove my worth to them, spent years telling myself that if I could just work harder, be more patient, more forgiving, they would see me again. But maybe the truth wasn't that they couldn't see me. Maybe the truth was they never wanted to. When I got home that evening, I closed my laptop with a soft click and stared at the blank wall opposite my bed. For a long time, I sat there, motionless, feeling the heavy silence settle around me like dust. "If they can erase me from their lives," I whispered into the empty room, "maybe it's time I erase them from mine." The cafe was tucked away on a side street I barely remembered, a sleepy little place with cracked tile floors and the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. I picked the corner booth furthest from the door, my back to the wall, out of habit more than strategy. Warren arrived 5 minutes late, his steps measured, the weight of practiced authority wrapped around him like an old coat. Lorraine trailed behind, her smile polished to a dull, weary sheen. I stood just enough to be polite, then sat back down before either of them could pretend this was a normal family meeting. Warren cleared his throat, the sound rough and scraping. "Clarissa," he started, settling across from me. "It's time to put the past behind us. The holidays are coming. Family needs to come together." I traced the rim of my coffee cup with one finger, feeling the warmth bleed into my skin, but not my chest. Lorraine sat silently beside him, hands folded neatly on the table, her eyes like polished stone. For everyone's sake, Warren added, voice softening in a way I might have believed when I was 16. And what about my sake? I asked quietly, not looking up. A beat passed, thick and awkward. Warren shifted in his seat, his face tightening. This isn't about blame, Clarissa. It's about moving forward, about appearances. There it was, not forgiveness, not healing, just polishing the family portrait so it didn't show the cracks spidering beneath the surface. I nodded slowly, sipping my coffee so they wouldn't see my hands tremble with restrained fury. Lorraine's gaze never wavered. She offered me a smile so thin it could have sliced skin. We parted ways with empty words and colder hugs. I didn't agree to anything. I didn't say I'd show up for the holidays, but I also didn't say I wouldn't. Back at my apartment, the sunset bleeding red through the windows, my phone buzzed with a new text. Lorraine, don't embarrass us. You wouldn't want more trouble, would you? My hands went cold, the coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim as I set it down. The message wasn't about family. It never was. It was about control, about maintaining the illusion that had always mattered more to them than any truth. The knot in my chest tightened into something sharp, something solid. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply stared at the message until the screen dimmed and blackened under my thumb. I realized then that there was no peace to be made, no truce, no reconciliation, only surrender. And I had surrendered enough. They wanted my silence to smooth over their shame. They wanted my obedience to protect their reputations. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were demanding my disappearance. I opened my laptop and pulled up the family dinner invitation Warren had emailed an hour ago. I hovered the mouse over the RSVP button, the one that said accept. Then I clicked delete. I leaned back in my chair, the tension finally snapping, leaving something cold and clean in its place. I won't save them from the shame they deserve, I murmured into the empty room. The line had been drawn. The emails kept blinking on my laptop screen. An endless series of unopened apologies and half-hearted invitations. I sat motionless at the kitchen table, the evening shadows crawling across the walls like slow-moving smoke. Outside, the winter wind rattled the windows, but inside, it was a deeper kind of cold that kept me frozen in place. I didn't open any of them, not a single one. Instead, I pulled on a jacket and slipped into the night, my breath puffing in the crisp December air. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to move, needed to outrun the memories that kept clawing at my mind. I found myself in the parking lot of a rundown grocery store, its neon open sign flickering like a warning. And that's where I saw him, Travis, leaning against a beat-up pickup, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. He saw me too, stiffened like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the cracked asphalt, neither of us moving. Then he pushed off the truck and walked toward me. "Clarissa," he said, voice rough, like he'd been swallowing broken glass all day. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms, heart thudding painfully. What could you possibly have to say? He flinched, but didn't back down. I should have said something sooner, about Lacey, about everything. I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself to. "I knew," he admitted, his shoulders slumping. "I knew she lied. I knew she set you up. She told me it was just to get you out of the house, to make room for herself. I didn't think it would go this far." I stared at him, the words hitting me harder than I expected. Part of me had always hoped the truth would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like salt poured into a wound that had never really stopped bleeding. "You knew," I whispered, "and you said nothing." He nodded, shame painting his face a sickly gray. "I was scared. Warren, Lorraine, they're not people you cross lightly." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "You were scared? Try being the one they hunted." Images flooded my mind, crying on the porch that night, packing my life into a single suitcase, begging for someone, anyone to believe me. And he had known. He had stood by and watched me drown. I turned away, wrapping my arms tighter around myself against the wind. Travis didn't try to stop me. "I'm sorry," he called after me. "I was a coward." I didn't answer. His apology wasn't for me. It was for himself, to lighten the weight he had carried too long. I drove home with the radio off, the silence louder than any song. Inside my apartment, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at my reflection in the darkened windshield. They didn't break me because they were strong. They broke me because I let them. Not anymore. I believed walking away was weakness, I said to the woman staring back at me. Now I know it's the only power I ever had. I wiped my palms on my jeans, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. The morning sun was so bright it hurt my eyes, a cruel kind of mocking light, as if the sky itself was celebrating something I could not touch. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the tiny dressing room, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the satin of my wedding dress, trying to ignore the knot of dread forming beneath my ribs. Micah's family was already arriving, their voices warm and excited in the small country church. I should have felt that way too, nervous, giddy, full of hope. Instead, my heart drummed a slow, heavy beat, waiting for faces I knew deep down would never appear. I clutched my bouquet a little too tightly as the ceremony began, the wooden doors swinging open wide. Guests filed into the pews, smiling and whispering in anticipation. The reserved rows at the front remained empty. I kept glancing toward the door between readings and hymns, hoping for a glimpse of Warren's stoic face, Lorraine's careful hair, even Lacey's fake smile, but the doors stayed closed. As I walked down the aisle, I felt the absence of them like a weight pulling at the hem of my dress. The rows where they should have been were gaping wounds, glaring at me with every step. I met Micah's eyes at the altar. He smiled, soft and steady, the kind of smile that could have held the whole world together if it had needed to. For him, I lifted my chin. For myself, I forced my hands to stop shaking. We exchanged vows under the heavy Texas sun streaming through stained glass windows. We said I do. We kissed. We smiled for photos where his parents stood proudly at his side, and no one stood at mine. Later, at the reception, a friend pulled me aside, her voice hesitant. "I thought you should know," she said, glancing around. I overheard Lorraine talking. She said they never planned to come. They just RSVP'd yes so it wouldn't look bad if they changed their minds. The words didn't surprise me. Not really. The betrayal wasn't in their absence. It was in the deliberate cruelty of offering hope only to snatch it away at the moment it would hurt most. The weight in my chest hardened into something colder, sharper. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had choreographed it. They had made sure the empty pews would sit like accusations against me, made sure the silence of their absence would ring louder than any church bell. I wandered outside for air, my dress trailing across the gravel path leading to the small garden behind the church. Alone under the bright Texas sun, I let myself breathe. For the first time in a long time, the pain didn't consume me. It sharpened me. Today wasn't just about marrying Micah. It wasn't just about starting a life with someone who saw me, chose me, stood beside me without hesitation. It was also about marrying myself to the life I deserved, the life I had fought to keep breathing for, even when they tried to smother it. I ran my fingers over the delicate beading on my dress, feeling every stitch, every knot, every thread. Today, I married someone who chose me, I whispered to the endless, aching sky. And I chose myself too. A week after the wedding, life had begun to settle into a soft, unfamiliar rhythm. Micah and I moved through quiet mornings and lazy dinners, like people who were slowly learning how to breathe again. For the first time, the silence in my life didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. When the doorbell rang that evening, I was curled up on the couch with a book, one leg tucked under me. Micah answered, and when he brought the package in, I knew, before I even touched it, that something was wrong. It was wrapped in crisp white paper, tied with a gold ribbon. Lorraine's handwriting scrawled across the card, taped to the top. For all the memories that matter. I didn't want to open it. I peeled the paper away anyway, fingers clumsy, heart pounding harder with each layer. Inside was a photo album, thick and heavy, its leather cover embossed with swirling vines. I cracked it open, a nauseous knot tightening in my stomach before I even saw the pages. At first glance, it was beautiful, polished and perfect. Family vacations, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, smiling faces, clinking glasses, warm embraces. But page after page, I searched for myself and found nothing. Not even in the background, not even a blurred hand or the edge of a shoulder. Where group photos once included me, the space had been trimmed away, or worse, photoshopped so seamlessly, it was as if I had never existed at all. Gone. Deliberately, methodically, cruelly. A cold wave washed over me, and I realized I was shaking. My vision blurred, the pages swimming before my eyes. My hands itched to tear the album apart, to scream, to demand someone acknowledge what they had done. But I didn't. I closed the album carefully, smoothing down the cover like tucking a child into bed. I placed it back into the box, retied the ribbon without tightening the knot. Some betrayals didn't deserve an audience. I carried the box out to the dumpster behind our building. The evening was cool, the sky a soft watercolor of pink and purple. Somewhere nearby, a radio played a country song I couldn't quite catch. I lifted the lid of the dumpster, placed the box inside gently, and let the lid fall shut with a hollow clang. If they wanted a life without me, they could have it. I turned away without looking back, the air feeling lighter with every step I took. The grief didn't disappear. It stitched itself into me in quiet places I didn't know existed yet. But the anger had finally burned itself out. Micah met me at the door, his hand brushing against mine without a word. Inside, our small apartment smelled like something baking, something sweet and new. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't need to win against them. I just needed to win my own life back. The morning light spilled across the tiny balcony, wrapping everything in a soft gold that almost made the world seem kinder than it was. I sat with a chipped coffee mug warming my palms, the early summer air thick with the promise of heat. On the table beside me rested an envelope, its corners softened from months of being shoved in drawers and forgotten, though never fully out of mind. My name was scribbled across the front in Warren's familiar, blocky handwriting. I didn't open it. Instead, I pulled out a different envelope, the letter I had written long ago but never sent, the one filled with words I had bled onto the page in the raw aftermath of everything they had done. Anger, grief, pleading for them to see me, to believe me, to choose me. I unfolded it carefully, the paper crackling under my fingertips. I read every word, feeling the echo of that old pain, but not drowning in it this time. It was a letter from a woman I barely recognized anymore. A woman who thought love could be wrestled from people who never meant to give it. I smiled, soft and sad, then stood and walked back inside. The lighter was in the kitchen drawer, next to the spare batteries and the takeout menus we never used. I carried it out to the balcony, flicked the flame to life with a trembling thumb. The paper caught almost instantly, curling and blackening at the edges before the fire raced across it. I held it by one corner, watching as months of anguish disintegrated into gray ash, pieces fluttering up into the sky like tiny broken birds. I wasn't sending them my pain. I wasn't gifting them my grief. I was letting it go, piece by burning piece. When the last scrap of it was gone, I breathed in deeply, the smoke sharp but oddly clean in my lungs. Inside, Micah was waiting, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, sorting through a box of wedding photos. He looked up as I entered, smiling like he knew, without needing me to say it, that something inside me had shifted. I sat beside him, resting my head against his shoulder, and together we flipped through the glossy pages. In one picture I was laughing, real laughter, crinkling my eyes and lighting up my face. In another, Micah was spinning me across the dance floor, my dress a blur of white and silver. The photos weren't perfect. The lighting was off in some, a few shots were slightly blurry. But they were ours. No one had edited them. No one had cropped me out. They were real. I looked at Micah, at the life we were building together, and felt something deep and slow and right settle into my bones. Forgiveness is not a door I owe anyone to open. But peace is the home I built with my own hands. I knew there would still be days when old wounds ached like broken bones in a storm. I knew there would be moments when memories flared sharp and unwanted. Maybe some wounds never fully close. Maybe that's not the point. If my story has taught me anything, it's that real peace doesn't come from forcing others to accept you. It comes from accepting yourself, scars and all, and building a life you no longer need permission to live. Walking away was never a weakness. It was the beginning of choosing myself over a version of love that came with conditions. Maybe you've been there too, standing at the crossroads between who others want you to be and who you are meant to become. Maybe you're still carrying a weight that was never yours to bear. If so, I hope you remember, healing is not forgetting. It's learning to live with the lessons and still moving forward. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone to find peace? Share your experience in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, leave a 1 inch in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't like it, I welcome your thoughts too. Tell me why and where you're tuning in from. If you enjoyed this video and it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more true stories about resilience, healing, and finding your voice. Your story matters here too.